Now, this week, a trans-identified male prisoner, Barbie Kardashian, was acquitted of all charges after threatening to rape and harm a female prisoner and a female prison guard while held in custody in a female prison. Sorcha Lachlan is with the Countess, that's a group advocating for women's rights in Ireland, stated that the verdict sends a stark message to the world. And Sorcha joins me now. Good morning to you, Sorcha.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm well, and thank you so much for taking time for us today. Just for people who mightn't be too familiar with this case, will you give me the background?
Sure, yeah, I'll do my best. So, Barbie Kardashian is a male. He is 22 years old now, and he was in prison for threatening to rape and murder his mother. He's a very disturbed young person, and he was initially placed in the women's wing of Limerick Prison because he identifies as a woman and was able to get a gender recognition certificate from the state, which states that he has changed his gender from male to female. And so the policy in the prison service was to place those prisoners in the women's estate, both in Limerick, and then there was also a case in Docus in Dublin. So while he was held on the women's wing on a particular landing, he made threats against two women, one of whom was a prisoner and one of whom was a prison officer. Threats on multiple occasions, and he himself gave evidence that he had indeed said the things that he was accused of saying. So the court heard last week 4 days of fairly harrowing evidence about the nature of those threats, and then he was found not guilty of all four offences. So the judge directed the jury to find not guilty on one, and then they found not guilty on three others on Friday of last week. So that's the background, I suppose. We are very concerned, obviously, that males can be placed in women's prisons. That's we feel is an overreach of the law and should not be happening. It's very dangerous for women, obviously prisoners and prison officers, in that situation, and it harms the human rights of women.
And again, just for listeners there, Sorcha, Kardashian told the court that she wanted to make Miss McGee and Miss Lennon suffer because she was angry and upset that rumours were circulating about her leaving showers dirty on the women's landing of the prison. So that was the core issue that resulted in the threats. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Okay, right. And the result itself, why are you so concerned about the result and the ramifications of that?
So the subjective test as a defence to rape exists in Ireland. So it means an accused can argue honestly that he believed a woman was consenting, even if that belief was unreasonable. And we're outliers in having that kind of defence. And now we find that the same applies to these threats to kill or seriously harm. That because he said, that the threats were not realistic or practical to carry out, and he denied intention to carry through with them, that therefore he is not guilty of the offence. So we know that he said the words in anger. We know that the women perceived that he intended to carry out those threats. However, because of this intention, he was found not guilty, we assume. Now, we don't have, obviously, the jury deliberations, so I don't want to speculate too much on that. But what we are saying is that there's serious questions need to be asked about this subjective test and how it will enable a perpetrator. So if a prosecution must prove intent beyond reasonable doubt, then obviously perpetrators will deny intent, and therefore juries would struggle to find that the prosecution proved beyond reasonable doubt the intent to carry out the threat. So it's all very subjective, and what we're saying is that an objective test and a victim-led approach is needed so that the impact of the threats on the victim is not dismissed as it was in this case, And
is it possible, Sorcha, that precedent has been set here, and is that one of your concerns?
Yes, it would be a big concern. I'm not aware of how other cases like this. I know that this particular person was already serving a sentence for those for similar offences, making threats to torture, rape, and murder. So it's a complicated area. I suppose we'd have to look more deeply into that and study it. But yes, I suppose the precedent that we are very concerned about is the fact that he was there in the first place. A male, any male, would be placed in a women's prison is very concerning. Now we understand that particular man has been moved. However, there are other males who will claim a female identity and be placed in women's prisons. So we would like that to be stopped as a matter of urgency. We have drafted a bill. Our founder and Laoise de Brún and Father Tobin have worked on a bill which would essentially detach the Gender Recognition Act from prisons, so that prisons wouldn't come under the scope of that act, and therefore the woman's estate would be female only. So that's past the first stage, and we're hoping to be able to get more Dáil time to debate that bill, and that would essentially protect from this ever happening again. It's egregious that those men, any men, were there in the first place. They should not be there. It is not safe or fair for women who are the most marginalised. These women usually are in prison for crimes of poverty, not always, but often crimes of poverty. They're often victims of violence by men in their own lives, and they should be at least safe in prison while they're serving their sentences for whatever crime they committed. They should not be at risk of further harm while in prison. That's not the point of prison.
Can I pick you up on your references to Kardashian, because Kardashian is identifying as a female, and still you insist on calling Kardashian he. Is that deliberate, Sorcha?
Well, I refer to people by their sex-based pronouns. So yes, he's a male, and that cannot be changed. I don't think it's a crime yet to do so. It's a direction, and it's probably custom and practice. I feel it's very confusing for listeners when they're hearing about somebody as a woman, but actually then they're being told later that it's a male. And so for me, clarity around this issue is very important, and that's why I would always refer to them as male or trans-identified males or men.
And have you any concerns about the recent hate crime legislation, that what you're saying could be perceived as driving hate in some way, Sorcha? Is that?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a relief that they have so far, for now, dropped the hate speech element of that bill. And so me simply talking, I hope, is not constituent to crime. If I committed a crime and ended up in court, I don't know how that would be received. And actually in that hate crime bill, the threshold is the perception of the victim and not of the perpetrator in that case. So we have this double standard there that, if somebody, obviously in this case, the subjective test was the mindset of the perpetrator, and in the hate crime bill, the test is the victim of that. So if somebody perceives that you have acted against them because of hatred of their protected characteristic, then it furthers the crime or increases the level of punishment for that crime. But so far it's not a crime, and so therefore I will continue to use clear and accurate language.
Can I ask you, Sorcha, that if the person before the courts here, God, I'm examining my own sentences now as I go on, but anyway, the person before the courts, if that was a male who committed the same issues, do you think the court and the jury would have looked on this differently?
Do you mean a male without a gender recognition?
Yes, made those threats, for example. If it wasn't a trans person, I suppose is what I'm saying.
Yes, I do think it would be received slightly differently. It's hard to say what the mindset of the jury we don't know. But it does seem like these kinds of things are more acceptable because people are afraid to criticise certain groups of people, and we would see in our work that trans-identified males fall into that category where you can't criticise them. So just for clarity, this is a person who has male genitalia. he is a male. They women who have been in that prison who have been released have described him like that they have described the conditions that they're under. So we have to just take that into consideration here.
What do you mean? That he's sharing shower areas and like that?
Well, no. No, so similar to what was up in court actually was, verbal abuse of women on the landings, and not just from this man, but from other men who were held in that prison, where the prisoners felt very afraid. They described how they were worried about lapses in security, where the men might be able to get in with the women. They've described, hearing foul language coming from the cells where the men are held, those kinds of things, and they would be just regular, women prisoners who were only in for short amounts of time. So we feel that their rights are totally undermined by this policy of housing males in a female prison. How they should be housed is a matter for other discussions, but they shouldn't have been there in the first place. Shouldn't have been in a position to make threats like this against any woman.
Can any just finally, Sorcha, can any aspect of this be appealed?
I can't speculate on that.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to say. A jury has made this decision, so yeah.
Okay, all right. Good to talk to you today, Sorcha, and thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you. Good morning to you. That is Sorcha Ní Lachlan there from the Countess. That's a group advocating for women's rights in Ireland.